Do you ever have a desire to sit down and play a video game so realistic it makes you feel like you're actually in combat? You're watching your teammates drop like flies. You have no idea where the incoming fire is coming from because there's no radar. You can't tell friend from foe because there's no red dots above their heads. And then when you do get into a gunfight, you realize that you forgot how to aim real guns. And then finally, after sweating it out, you squad up with your teammates, you get ready to push an objective, and all of a sudden,
Alright, bam. Dead.
welcome to Insurgency Sandstorm, so realistic that you'll feel it in your balls every single time you die, and if you don't have balls, you'll grow them and then you'll feel them in your new balls. It's a pretty hard game to play. This is the perfect game, however, for our topic today, which is realism in video games. So we're doing Insurgency Sandstorm. It's a PC game. It's about $30 on Steam if it's not on sale, and it's a military simulation game, or Milsim game, only slightly more casual than Arma. I think Arma is the most hardcore Milsim sim game that I'm aware of, and this one would be number 2. I also hid 4 full game codes for this game, that is 4 complete copies of this game. They'll be on screen somewhere throughout the video, so first come, first serve. The game plays roughly as you would expect: realistic weapons, realistic attachments, ballistics, and all that sort of stuff. It's 1 to 2 shots to kill. You pretty much only get 2 shots if you're wearing super heavy armor, no health regen, headshots always kill. Meleeing people's a very bad idea, and you get fairly realistic movements slash recoils. You don't get a lot of HUD or indicators that'll let you know what's going on either. And my opinion on the recoil in this game is that it's a little bit too high. I have shot a lot of the weapons from this game in real life, semi-automatic and fully automatic, and in my experience I can aim them better in real life than I can here, albeit in real life I'm at the range shooting a target standing still. I'm not like moving and sweating and under pressure and carrying a 40-pound backpack. That can definitely screw some stuff up. And another odd thing about this game is that there are some big toys. You can shoot RPGs, AT-4s, you can throw C4, there are helicopters and trucks on the map, and they are utterly devastating, just like they are in real life. One fun story before we jump into the actual topic, I know I'm delaying and being slow, is that one of the first games I played, my teammates found out that they could pick up friendly C4 and carry it around, and if your friend hit the detonate button, you would blow up your friend. So we were playing as Americans, and the Americans were trading C4s and running into the Iraqi bases and screaming "A la America" and blowing themselves up. So 10 out of 10 gameplay experience. This is kind of an interesting one. Let's get to our actual topic today. I've rambled forever about realism in video games. Video games, and especially shooting video games, have sought for ultra realism since the 90s. Even Wolfenstein and Doom was an attempt at more realism versus other things just being first person in nature. And a lot of the innovation in the video game industry was designed to provide this sort of realistic experience to customers. Huge innovations in inputs and controls and game ideas and graphics and rendering, especially graphics. They want each game to look more and more and more and more real. And one of the important questions when you're looking at this evolution of realism in video games is that why do we video game players want to have a real war experience? Why do we really want to be in a war? Is that an experience that you really want? And also, isn't it a bit strange that our relaxing fantasy time is so focused on simulating real life as we know it? Obviously, not all games do this. You still have your Kingdom Hearts and your Final Fantasy and your Fire Emblem and your Katamari Damacy and Beat Saber and stuff, but by and large, games try to tell some kind of realistic story, and especially shooters, which is what we mostly do here on this channel, try to tell that story. So I'm going to try to answer these 2 questions, and I think that will explain most of the desire for realism in games. Then we'll talk about realism in this game a little bit. So number 1 is, why a real war? And the shortest answer for this is human nature. We as human beings are designed to be social animals. We are designed to have a group, a fan, a clan, a family, a clique, something that we stick to. And in this group, we are also hardwired in our brain to designed to communicate primarily through stories. We tell true factual historical stories that you can learn from. We tell symbolic stories where the characters are stand-ins for other things that we face in real life. And of course, we tell stories about values, moral stories, value driver stories, religious stories, to kind of instill some sort of moral fiber in the next generation. The majority of these stories are about a hero triumphing, most often over a villain or some sort of natural or moral challenge in some way, but it's the story of the main character, the hero, the protagonist, triumphing over some kind of challenge. And more often than not, it's a actual physical person or evil demon or a real, like, corporeal being type of villain. And these type of heroes that conquer their foes are often lauded with the highest possible praise in the community. They're always the good guys. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing you should aspire to be more than a hero of some kind. I mean, it's literally the story of almost every movie ever. And you could sum this up thinking about it. When you're a little kid, and you're taking in media and you're learning about the world, when you grow up, do you want to be the American sniper Chris Kyle, war hero, protector of freedom and American values? Or do you want to be Nathan, the sketchy guy who sends you Facebook messages trying to get you to join on for his opportunity and some sort of strange multi-level marketing strategy? I mean, both of those will technically pay the bills, but one of them is certainly more moral, just, honorable, or whatever than the other. And I think that it's natural in this sense that we obviously don't want to be the sketchy multi-level marketing guy. We want to be the hero, because these sort of stories and being the hero satisfy our ancient primal drives for community protection, stability of community, respect and status inside that community, desire to be loved by a person or by the community as a whole, and finally a mastery of skills. We like learning things, we like getting good at things, and we like mastering those things. This also evolutionarily sets us up to raise the next generation to have this same sort of values and attitudes to protect, preserve, serve, all those sort of great things. So it's only natural that the majority of the stories we tell, which is our primary communication, it's literally what I'm doing right now, and our fantasy time would in some way be about conflict resolution, violent or otherwise. The majority of this is about violently resolving a conflict to protect your group or your people or your thing. Moving along to question number 2 of why we would want to focus on realism so much, it flows directly from question number 1. And I'll start with just saying that little kids play fight, and real fight. And even when we grow up and become adults, we fight, we compete, we challenge each other. And games, going all the way back to the beginning of time, have always been competitive in some way. Even if you look at checkers or rock, paper, scissors, there is a winner and a loser, a triumphant hero and somebody who is losing. So they've always been about winning, about being better than somebody else, and achieving some sort of mastery in the game, showing that you can learn and be good and train yourself. Current multiplayer games are just an extension of this, with very few exceptions. You can go from Clash of Clans all the way to Overwatch on the gaming spectrum and everything in between, and these games are ultimately about mastering some skill and winning over somebody else, especially that second part, besting somebody else as if you are the triumphant person. So the next step is, why not make a game to see who could be the best hero? Not in a fantasy land, but like for reals. Like if you had to do this for reals, what would you do? And why not make that type of game mirror real life as closely as possible? This increased interest in it, people see things they recognize, they have an emotional attachment to it. And I think that's why Milsim games or military style games are so popular, because people see this and they have these sort of fantasies. I'm sure you all do. It's like, well, if it was for real, if my school was invaded by a gunman, could I throw my book hard enough to hit him in the face and take his gun and shoot the other guy and be the hero? If I were really in Iraq, what would I do differently than all those soldiers? If a ninja broke into my house and challenged me to a sword fight, could I catch the blade and break it and then stab him in the neck? We do this kind of thing all the time. However, the video game, it's like, well, why not try it out? Here you go. Here's the real world as best as we can possibly make it. You go and show me what you would do. Well, apparently I would die a lot. That's what I would do. You would find me dead. I would be so dead in the real life. I wouldn't die once, but you'd find like 5 copies of my body because they would just kill me that many times. I would just die all day, every day. So not exactly my skill set for survival, but this is, fantasy fulfillment. There's an interesting trend lately, however, of super unrealistic games being very popular. Case in point of Fortnite and Overwatch. And I think that not just with kids, obviously they're more popular with kids because of the rating, but I think that this is because in the modern world with YouTube and videos and drone footage, people are coming closer to the reality that war is worse than hell. And that leads me to a fantastic quote from the show MASH, where one person is saying war is hell, and the other person says, no, war and hell are different things, and war is worse. And they're like, well, what do you mean? What could be worse than hell? And the guy says, well, in hell, everybody's there for a reason. They've all done something horrible and bad in their lives, and they're being punished for it. In war, everybody's innocent, from most of the people who got recruited not knowing what they were signing up for, to the civilians caught in the middle, to the guys on the other side. Everybody except maybe the top brass is innocent in this whole thing, and they all suffer equally. So that was an interesting MASH quote. But I think that reality is dawning on people, which is why you see the rise of really, really goofy and less realistic games. But all of this is fine and healthy. I've kind of had a negative spin on it, but I think it's perfectly normal for people to desire to be a warrior, to be a hero, to go out and fight and challenge and conquer. And I don't believe that we are in any capacity training the next generation of killers, that all of our children are getting murder simulators. If anything, I would wager that video games are more of an aggression or frustration outlet than they are any sort of boiler pot or increasing that level of aggression. Also, doing something in a video game is not the same as doing it in real life. I've played shooters for literally years. That does not make me a weapons expert. Yeah, I've learned things in video games. Realistic ones have animations, and I've learned how to like change magazines and guns and do little things, and I've read stuff online, but that doesn't transfer over to real on-the-range training. When you're actually on the range, you have to consider things like squeezing the trigger instead of jerking it. You have to consider your breathing, your stance. You have to pick which eye you're going to aim down the sights with, or both, depending on what type of person you are. There are so many little nuances that you just can't simulate in a game. So even if you played these games all day, which I did, like the first time I ever fired an MP5 submachine gun, I played it in video games, so I knew how to load it. I didn't know how to hit a damn thing with it. God, I didn't know how to use the sights properly. I didn't have a good stance. I just had seen the animation and I could recreate that. There's so much that you can't simulate yet, and I think it's going to be a long, long time before we get truly hyper-realistic video games. Right now, they are at best sort of turret shooters. You're like a little guy on a swivel turret and you just kind of shoot at things that move, and you can't simulate that real heavy, hard sweat, struggle, panic, little like air density and trigger pulls and wrist twerks and stuff like that that you would see in real life in real shooting scenarios. Guys, that is all for this video. I've rambled a little bit more than I intended to. I hope that you learned something useful from it. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.